All right. Then let us, before I say that too excitedly, who's managed to have a look at any of the material for this week? Anyone? Anyone? I feel like Ferris Bueller's day off. Oh, Gail's giving me the thumbs up. Good on you, Gail. Steph's giving me a smile. Oh, my goodness, a few people are, oh, my name doesn't have a Y in it. That's true. It doesn't. Well, except for the Kelly at the end. You know, just saying. Not to be a nitpicker, but talking to you has a lot of them in it. What? Okay, so we have people that are prepared. This is a lecturer's dream. All right, let us jump into mistake then. I'm going to share my messy screen. Can we just, this is going to be a real quick coverage, but I'm going to release the answer guide afterwards anyway. So now let's just have a little wee looky at the, we'll have a look at what we've read this week first, then we'll have a look at the little animated problem, and then we'll just quickly skip through because it's not going to, half of our time's gone, unfortunately, although I am proposing, oh, that does remind me, I am proposing for the people that do constitutional that we get cracking at about 10 past 7 and go to about 10 past 8. If that is okay with you folks, can I just take a little quick poll? Because can you just type a Y in the chat box if you're okay with it going until about 10 past 8? Oh, lovely, lovely. It's just that I don't want to make those, I know I mentioned this before, but there were some of us that weren't present then. And I just want to make sure that the constitutional law people just have a chance, don't feel too rushed transitioning from one Zoom to the other. That's very good of you guys that are not doing constitutional to say okay to that. So I'll say that, you know, henceforth we shall go to about 10 past. That gives us a few more minutes this evening if we need them. But just thinking about what we've read this week for mistake, I like to jump in on this one rather than misrepresentation because misrep is so big. So let's just recap quickly what we've gone through, okay? So in terms of common mistake, can someone either in the chat box or just turn your mic on, common mistake, how many parties are suffering under a mistake for common mistake? One party, two parties? Two, both parties, same mistake. Oh, Steph's gone into the detail already. Nice one. Two, that's exactly right. Two parties, and as Steph said, each have the same mistake, okay? Two mistakes, and the mistakes are the same. Both parties, one mistake, okay? Common mistake at common law. There's a few different types of common mistake. Let us briefly recap the types of common mistake, okay? First one is common mistake as to what? It's a Latin, horrible Latin. I don't generally like legal Latin, but race, nice one, Mike, race extincta. And the result is that the contract is void, voidable, unenforceable. Ha! I'm liking what I'm seeing in the chat box. Yes, contract is void. You contract A people will know I harped on and on and on about it, didn't I, in contract A. There is a difference between void contracts and voidable contracts. Before we go any further, someone please tell me, what's the difference between a void contract and a voidable contract?
I got void makes it null and completely without legal force or binding effect, and voidable is that which is not absolutely void but can be avoided.
Yes, exactly. So as if it didn't happen, exactly, Steph. So where it's void, it's as though it never happened in the first place. Okay, it never existed in the first place. And voidable means just that the contract is vulnerable to being what we call set aside or avoided. Okay, now there's some problems with that, not problems, but weaknesses for the plaintiff's case. What are the limitations? When can you not set aside a contract if it's voidable? Big ticket items. If you can't get restitutio in integrum. So if you're going to be able to have a contract set aside, if it's voidable and you want to ask the court to set the contract aside, there's a few limitations. And we did cover this in contract A. Briefly recap. If there has been inordinate delay, you can't set aside a contract that's voidable. And we sometimes call that latches also. If there has been a third party intervene, an innocent third party, yes, there are a number of other time limitation. Yes, time limitation. Delay is the real big one. Yeah, and the second one is the issue about bona fide third parties entering the scene. Okay, and that's what we have here, but we'll just see whether that creeps into our ultimate discussion as to the problem question. So for res extincta, if there is a common mistake as to the, what does res extincta refer to? There's a mistake as to the
subject matter.
Yes, exactly. So your contract is void. Good case example here, please. The smelly corn case. My contract A people will remember I tend to call cases odd names. Smelly corn. Ah, beautiful! Thank you, John. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Tunefa. So, yeah, hasty. Now, hang on a second. Turia. There we go. I think that's how you spell it. Yeah. Okay. Common mistake as to what? Next one. Yeah. And what does that mean in ordinary language? Ownership title, exactly. And the result here, contract is that's thinking music. Yeah, sorry, Ella, hello. Oh, I didn't say hello to you before. Yes, you're right. Void. All right, common mistake as to, let's burn along because we're burning daylight hours here. Subsisting circumstances. There's no fancy Latin here. If there's a common mistake as to subsisting circumstances, oh, that's difficult to say. Contract is Nice. And the case, please. Oh, we forgot to do a ownership and title case. Hang on. What was that? Sorry to backtrack. Yes? Okay. Case for subsisting circumstances. I've got Bell and Lever. No. That's common mistake as to the next one. So Gale and Smith, you've skipped ahead. You're already on to the next one. Griffith and Brymer, that's the one I was thinking about. That's the one of the coronation cases. Okay. We'll come back to that case when we do frustration later on in term. Next one, common mistake as to. This was the one that you guys, Samantha, you were probably thinking about. Okay, this is a bit more complicated. Contract is what? At common law. John, we haven't got to unilateral just yet. You're skipping ahead. Common mistake as to subject matter. Void at common law. I can see people thinking. Thinking. Gail, good on ya. No, it's not. But good on you for having a go. It's not void at common law. It is only void at common law. Sorry, this was a trick one, wasn't it really? If what? And this time I'm thinking of Bell and Lever. It's only void if it makes the mistake what? It makes the thing without the quality that's mistaken what? 2 words. First word, essentially. Go. Essentially different. Okay, and that is Bell and Lever. Oh. Okay. Now, if there's a mistake, if it's not void at common law, okay, there is a case that says, well, hang on a minute, notwithstanding the result at common law, it might be voidable in equity if 3 elements are satisfied. One of my favourite judges decided this case, and that might give it away. Can anyone guide me through the 3 elements? I'm thinking of the case where Lord Denning decided whether the mistake as to whether an apartment was controlled under the rent control legislation in the UK, whether that fact, both parties thought that this apartment was regulated by that legislation, and so therefore only a cheap amount of rent could be charged. But it turned out that it wasn't, and more expensive rent could have been charged. Now, both parties were mistaken about a subject matter, a quality of what was contracted for. That is, the fact that the unit, the apartment, was regulated as to rent, but it was not. Okay.
Is it Lewis and Avery?
Nope.
Oh, Taylor versus Johnson.
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're too far ahead of us, Gail. Too far ahead of us. We're still on common mistake.
Solly and Butcher, isn't it?
That's it. That is it. And the last one, there we go. Solly and Butcher. Okay. So that is common mistake. Mutual mistake. If you've seen the video, that's how I remember it. M. Many mistakes made mutually. Now, it might not necessarily be many mistakes, but How many parties are suffering under a mistake here?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I've got John saying both. Tammy Lee saying both. 2. Yeah, might be 2 if both are mistaken. Or 1 if the other party has the same interpretation objectively as the court. Yep. So they're different mistakes. One might be mistaken about the contract and what it says. The other might have a completely different view. Both of the views will be different. One might be mistaken, the other one might be mistaken, or the other one's interpretation of the contract might align with the court's interpretation, and therefore that's the interpretation that will be given to the contract. Okay? So, if the court can't ascertain an objective meaning, then the contract is that's it. Ace, please. Beautiful Tammy Lee. Yeah, Gail, ex-peerless from Bombay. So the contract specified that goods were to be shipped on a certain vessel, ex-peerless from Bombay. But there was one of those sailing in March, one sailing in December. You couldn't objectively tell which one. Therefore, and obviously one party thought it was March, one thought it was December. What did the court say? Void, because they couldn't give any objective interpretation to the content of that contract. And if the court can work out an objective meaning, then the contract is Gail's on fire today. Wait a minute. Valid. Yeah, another quick trick one for you. If the court can objectively work out a meaning, if, for example, there was never an ex-peerless that sailed in December, well, there's only going to be one, isn't there? So one of the parties will be mistaken and the other party actually had a valid interpretation of the contract. Okay, and that is the way that the common law will hold that contract. It'll be valid. Okay, equity follows the law. Exactly. Why does equity follow the law here? What enlivens equity's jurisdiction? And if you haven't done any equity yet, I would recommend that you have a little look under the week 2 tab, because I give a little, there's a little video there that explains a few of the basic mysteries of equity. So what normally will enliven equity's jurisdiction? Silence. It's naughtiness. It's naughtiness. Then there is normally some kind of unconscionable conduct somewhere that calls equity's principles into play. And if there is an objective meaning that the court can ascertain for a contract, then, and even if the court can't ascertain an objective meaning, the fact is, if there's mistakes there, but the two mistakes are different, and that's the essence of mutual mistake. The mistakes are different, then neither knows of the other one's mistake, and so there's been no naughty attempt to try and take advantage of the other party, and that's what will normally be, yes, Gail. And that, in that situation where you have naughtiness, that will normally then be taken as a case of unilateral mistake. So where one party is mistaken, the other party is not mistaken and deliberately tries to take advantage of that situation, that will be a case of unilateral mistake in equity, not mutual mistake. Okay, so With mutual mistake, real easy. At common law, either it's going to be void or valid. Equity will follow the law because with mutual mistake, there is no naughtiness that can enliven equity's jurisdiction. Okay? Unilateral mistake. Let's skip through this real quick so we can get to the little animation. What's the general, how many parties have a mistake here? Lovely, Gail's already said one. Lovely, sorry, oh, Amy, Steph, everyone, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Lovely, yes. Now, the general approach at common law is it an objective theory or subjective theory that's used? Yep, thanks, Samantha. Thanks, Gail. Absolutely objective. Analysis is used. So, a mistaken party can't rely on their own mistake to void the contract, even if fundamental and even if the other party knew. Common law takes a real hard line. It analyses the contract objectively, and if there's just one mistake that is made and you are the unfortunate person making the mistake, unfortunately, so long as the contract holds up under an objective analysis, that contract will be valid. Okay, there are a few narrow exceptions here. All right, firstly is, and this is the subject of tonight's tune, must be fundamental matter to, oh, Gail, that's inequity. I'm talking only about common law here, okay? We need to get that really straight in our minds now. We're just talking about unilateral mistake at common law here, okay? We're not talking about equity yet. So the approach at common law is to look and analyse the contract objectively. If you can make the contract work objectively, it will work. Just because one party is mistaken, as long as that court can interpret the contract and it hangs together, you've got all the fundamentals, offer, acceptance, consideration, you know, all of the terms, all of the things that you did in contract A, as long as all of that stuff is there, at common law, if you've made a mistake, it's your bad luck. And what is the answer to that? The answer is caveat emptor, isn't it? Buyer beware, usually. If you've made a mistake, it's your fault. Common law takes a hard line. Okay, few exceptions. Identity, exactly. And horrible Latin phrase again. Non est. Beautiful. Wow. Amy's already translated for us. Okay, so equity is a little different and we'll come back to that. Unilateral mistake as to identity here, and this is the stuff we need for tonight's what are your elements, please? A regards identity as material, not material. A, who is our plaintiff, regards identity as, yes, thanks, Samantha. Yes, Steph, material. Okay, A intended not to contract with who? Beautiful, John's read the text, thank you. B, but with another party, C. Ooh, not copyright. Okay, and B, here's the kicker. Yeah, B is the rogue, and they knew this. So they knew that A only wanted to contract with party C. Okay. Now, if so, we are what at common law? Voidable. Yes. Thank you. Oh, I like Sorry Ella. She's doing the caveat words here. Typically void. Like it. Okay, so where contracts are concluded by, there's two different, there's slightly different rules here for one circumstance of mistake as to identity as to another circumstance to, and I'm thinking, I love that you already know it. Awesome. So contracts concluded by writing or contracts concluded face to face. Okay, contracts concluded by writing. The result is if you can satisfy those three elements, it's void at common law. Contracts face to face. Now, you've got to satisfy the presumption and then you've got to go ahead and address the elements after that. If you can, it'll be void, right? The presumption where parties are operating face to face, what's that? I think somebody caught a harsher with fat to face. Yes, they are. Beautiful. Sorry, Ella. Lovely Latin again. So where the parties are inter presentes, there's a presumption that you intend to contract with who? The party that is, yeah, exactly, in front of you. All right. Now, you can rebut that. A couple of cases here. Yell out any old case, I'll take it. Yeah, Ingram. And that was the one that was successful, wasn't it? Ingram and Little is where that they, now, it's rebutted because A took sufficient steps to verify the identity of the person, right? If that's the case, you've knocked over the presumption, you can then go ahead and prove your case. Element 1, 2, 3. Yep. Alrighty, now there are a few more that we could go through, but we've gotten the one that we need for tonight's. Now I will just cite out the other cases that people were yelling out to me in the chat box, and also Lewis. All right, so this is the material that we'll be working with for this little animated stuff. Saunders and Anglia did seem unfair. Yes, I know. We can have a chat about that later. I hate that case. I hate a strong word, but anyway. All right, so let's have a quick, I'll get rid of that. Let's have a quick look at our scenario for this week. It's only just a couple of minutes.
Please have a seat, Mitchell.
Actually, I'm generally known as Lord Mitchell of the Seven Golden Orbs, but you can just call me Mitchell if you wish.
Thanks. Do you have a legal problem I can help with?
Indeed I do. No doubt you would be aware that the author Jordan Roberts has recently completed the most recent Wheel of Thrones book. It's called On the Limb of Prophecy. Have you read it yet?
Actually, no, I haven't.
You'll love it when you do. It's his best yet. Anyway, recently I found out that Jordan Roberts was going to do an impromptu book signing right here in town. Did you know that?
No. Somehow I didn't hear about it.
Seriously? You missed out. Anyway, the book signing was meant to be at 10 o'clock, but at the last minute I couldn't find the jeweled scabbard for my sword of justice and heritage. I wanted to go in costume, you see.
I'm sure that was very impressive.
You know it. Anyway, with the delay finding my scabbard, and the fact that a digital watch just wouldn't go with my warrior costume, I lost track of time and I arrived just after the book signing had finished. I was devastated.
I'm sorry to hear that, Mitchell. It must have been disappointing.
Yes, but all was not lost. Next thing I knew, some guy was waving to me from a nearby coffee shop. He was in his late 40s, had a beard, dressed for business. I went over and he introduced himself as Jordan Roberts. I was stoked. I did a double take. He didn't look exactly like the publicity shots on the back of his book, but then again, who does, right?
That makes sense. Go on.
So this guy tells me he is only allowed to sign copies of the book at official signings, but he has one in his bag which he signed earlier. It retails for $25 unsigned, but he would let me have it for $100. I thought that was a bit steep, but it was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. I paid him the money, and he added my name above the signature in the book. He seemed like a really good guy. I pulled out my phone and he was happy to pose for some pics with me. Anyway, I rushed home and put the pics up on Facebook. My friends were rather unimpressed though.
Aren't they fans of Mr. Roberts?
Oh, they're all super fans. That's why they were unimpressed. Turns out they were all at the book signing, and this guy who I gave $100 to was definitely not Jordan Roberts. I got completely ripped off.
Do you know who the person was who actually signed your book?
Yeah, he's some guy who works in a menswear store in town. I went to him and asked for my $100 back, but he just laughed and said that I'd agreed to the price. But I only agreed because he said he was Jordan Roberts.
That's quite a tale. Let me think about what we might do.
Okay. So let's skip over those ones. We'll come back to them if we've got a bit of time after. I want us to put our IRAC hats on, please. IRAC hats on. And is Mitchell's contract tainted by unilateral mistake? Because obviously we've just had one party that's mistaken. As to identity, yep. Do we all agree that's the issue? Sweet. Okay, so to avoid a contract for unilateral mistake, now, first you've got to deal with the presumption, don't you? Because if you don't, the rebuttable presumption is going to either knock you out of the ballpark and that's the end of the story, or you'll get over that and then you'll be able to prove your case. So, can we fill in the blanks? I'll just delete those. Let's work from scratch. There's a presumption that what? You just said it to me before. Oh, Tammy Lee's already got it there. Intend to deal with the person in front of you. This is rebuttable if the plaintiff can show that they took sufficient steps to verify the identity of the person they dealt with. Yes? And you'd probably want to flick there something like Ingram Little. Okay? So, elements, A regards identity. We've already done this before when we were going through the principles. Bolton, that one is, Bolton and Jones. Okay, A intended not to contract with B but with C, and B, the rogue, knew this. They're the principles we're working with, okay? Okay, so let's jump in. How would you kick it off? What are you going to tell the marker first? apply to the current situation. Sorry, Ella's saying. What are you going to apply? You're going to explain for the marker that you understand the presumption, aren't you? Because all you've done here is you've just briefly set out the rules. So, sorry, go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Mitchell didn't, afterwards he said he was a bit doubtful as to whether it was the same person because he looked a bit different, but that was all post-contract as such. He never actually did, he never asked for any ID, or he never voiced that he was having any doubts or suspicious or not sure or anything. So basically he didn't really do anything to rebut the presumption that he was there to deal with the person that he was dealing with.
Yes, exactly. Megan said the same kind of thing in the chat box also. Steph saying Mitchell was a huge fan, which was the only reason he wanted to buy the book. So identity was the core factor. Yes, it was. Steph, you're skipping down to the elements though. We need to deal with the presumption. So why I say you're going to tell the marker, that in cases of unilateral mistake as to identity where the transaction occurs face-to-face, there's a presumption that Mitchell intended to deal with the party in front of him. Phillips and Brooks, that involved, which was, what was at issue in Phillips and Brooks? What was the thing that was stolen? Jewelry, thank you, Megan. And Lewis and Avery, what was the thing that was stolen by the rogue?
Car.
Ha ha, lovely, beautiful. So you're just showing the marker that you know the relevant case law here. You're not explaining it just yet. You're just telling the marker that you know the general principle, okay? The question will be whether Mitchell has done sufficient ascertaining the identity to rebut the presumption. Now we're going to go into a lovely little description of the case law. I'm not going to type it all out because I'm going to give you an answer guide later on this week. But what are you going to tell me about Lewis and Avery? Why is Lewis and Avery the key case here?
Because the guy selling the car thought he was selling it to the actor Richard Green, whose name wasn't even spelled the same.
Yes. So
and he showed a pass or something like that, but so he sort of just took it as being true. And he gave the address too, I think, and the guy knew that that's where he lived. Well, that might have been a different one.
That was Ingram.
Oh, that was the other one, yeah.
Also Phillips and Brooks. So the rogue produced a pass with an official looking stamp, and Steph saying court said you thought you were dealing with wasn't sufficient. Exactly. Was this sufficient to rebut the presumption? No, it wasn't sufficient to check the ID produced by the rogue themselves. That's not enough, really, is it? If identity is that important to you, if you're going to be a little bit suspicious, why on earth would you just accept any old ID that's produced to you from someone saying that they're Richard Green? You're accepting the rogue's own word for it, aren't you? And that's not good enough. Okay. Why did they say? I just want to quickly. Let's apply Lewis now. Okay, applying. Do these facts. Oh, I've changed fonts. What would the court say? What you need to tell the market is that you've spotted the facts that show insufficient steps were taken to verify identity? Mitchell. Go on, Michelle. I can see. The words are on the tip of your tongue. Come on now.
Mitchell didn't ask for any proof of identity
Exactly.
from the person he was dealing with.
And even though he had misgivings about the fact that Roberts didn't look like his photo, did he? So in terms of Lewis and Avery, it's even more compelling. Less steps have been taken to verify identity. So a court would likely apply Lewis to hold, oh goodness me, sorry, my fingers aren't going very well tonight, that Mitchell did not take sufficient steps to safeguard his interests and check the identity of Roberts. Yes? Now, if you are looking for an HD, a little bit of sassiness in here, show the marker. What is the case that did get across the line here? Ingram. Why wouldn't Ingram help us here? What got them over the line in Ingram? Don't
They
worry.
originally didn't want to do. They originally refused
Yeah,
to
and
take the check.
yes.
And it was only when he said that he was a reputable businessman that and one of them went off to check, one of the sisters went off to check something.
Yes, exactly. So he said, my name is, what did he call himself? He said, my name is PGM Hutchinson of Sandstead. And the Mrs. Ingram, plural, because they were sisters, there's a few of them, one of them that was kind of savvy said, oh, thanks very much, but we're not going to take your check. One of the other sisters slips out the bag and goes and checks in the phone book. Now, it was held the combination of refusing to do the deal. Well, she actually said, no, the deal's off. We're not going to take the check. And the other one then went and checked, came back and went, he's all good. That combination of facts got them across the line. So you might be just briefly telling the marker how this doesn't assist Mitchell. Because really he didn't do anything, did he? He didn't check anything. All right. Now, do we end it there if you're an HD student? I'm hoping people, I can see Michelle saying no, but what more do you want? I always like to, when I was doing such things, even if there was a really clear answer on the presumption, I would normally just cover my bot and say, in the unlikely event that the presumption was rebutted, and then just briefly go through element 1, element 2, element, oh, I've disappeared, sorry. Let me just scroll down, element 3, right? So element 1 was, you have to show that identity was material, and element 2, you have to show that Mitchell intended to contract only with Roberts, not the person in front of him. So you'd just be making some little brief arguments to satisfy here, and the rogue knew. Well, you're not going to have any problem with that, are you? So then your conclusion is going to be that Mitchell's contract was, well, you'd probably say the court would apply which case? The one that's most similar. Yeah, thank you, Lewis. To hold that Mitchell's contract was not concluded under a unilateral, oh goodness me, mistake as to identity. Interpraise. Okay, the contract would be valid at common law, and a court would not order that the $100 be refunded. Okay, Mitchell won't be able to get an order for a refund of the money. Why can't we use equity here? This is, I know we, if you need to go or you've just had enough, you can just slip on out. This is just a, you know, we've gone through what we need to go through. Like I said, I'll give you an answer guide once you've had a chance to kind of consolidate all of this in your own little brain later in the week. But what were the elements in Taylor and Johnson? There needs to be a fundamental mistake as to what?
Identity.
Ooh, what was the mistake in Taylor and Johnson? Yeah, Steph, price, exactly, Gail. It needs to be a fundamental mistake as to, I'm talking only about Taylor and Johnson here. It needs to be a fundamental mistake for equity to intervene. There must be a fundamental mistake as to the contents of the contract, a term, not identity. Okay, so a fundamental mistake as to, let me just get my little here. I've already typed out the elements over here. Here's something I prepared earlier, saved my fingers from trying to do all of this. Okay, serious mistake about a fundamental term of the contract. So the Taylor and Johnson kind of unilateral mistake in equity deals with terms. It doesn't deal with identity.
Excuse me, AJ. I know we're heading off in a second. I just had a quick question with the Mitchell scenario though. In the little video, it said that the guy pulled the book out and wrote Mitchell's name above the signature. So I made the assumption that it was a book that it was signed by the real Roberts, that this guy had gone and gotten signed, and then he was selling it for whatever. So at the end of the day, he got what he wanted to. He might have paid too much and he didn't get it handed to him physically by the author, but it was still a book autographed by Jordan Roberts. Was that right?
Well,
or is that just one scenario, I guess?
I guess I don't think that is a material fact that you would, live or die on, if you know what I mean. Really what you're trying to establish is that Mitchell, in terms of your elements that you've got to prove, these two kind of go together, don't they? ID was super important to Mitchell, and he only intended to contract with Roberts. So when you're looking at trying to prove your elements, you've got to sort through, and this is, I guess, experience in issue spotting. You've kind of got to sort through the facts, and you've got to say, does the fact kind of tend to prove one of these two points? And the thing about adding the name above something that was already signed, I don't know that you could probably use it here, possibly, but just the fact that somebody inserted a name above a signature it's not really conclusive of itself to show that the rogue knew he was dealing with someone that was mistaken.
The way I read that was that, like, at a book signing, you're having it addressed to you personally, so that it's a personal, signature made out to the person who's buying the book, not just autographed. And I think that's how I read it, that it wasn't just an autographed book that he was buying. He was buying it autographed by the author, but also made out to him or dedicated to him personally by adding Mitchell's name into it.
Yes, and in my little answer guide, I kind of discuss 1 and 2 kind of hotly, one on top of the other, because really where you're thinking about these elements, identity was clearly material. The things that I focused in to show that identity was material to Mitchell was the fact that this was a book signing, and he dressed up, he wanted to be there. The whole point of him going to get this book, like John just said, was the fact that he was going to get the book inscribed to him. And that was super important because he wanted to meet the author of the books that he loved. Now, it's going to be ridiculous for him to accept anybody else's signature, because the whole point of getting the signature or the inscription is that you get it from the author, not any old person. So that's how I kind of argued the point in terms of materiality and intention only to contract with Roberts. So you're sifting through the facts to try and pick out the ones that most support your argument on those elements. And like John said, I think it's fairly clear that someone that goes to a book signing really only wants to get the author to inscribe the book. It's a bit pointless to get anybody else to sign it. I don't think you'd have any trouble with the third element. I think really there wouldn't be too much trouble showing unilateral mistake as to identity if it wasn't for the presumption. And I think that's where he'd fall over, unfortunately. I look forward to seeing your attempts. Let me see you wrestle with this and put it in some beautiful, eloquent prose for me, and I shall get feedback to you if you wish to do so. If you do want to do that, can I please ask you to run a spell check through it? Do try and get some practice in proper AGLC citation, because let's face it, this is practice for your written assessment, so you might as well give it a decent crack. So spell check, please. And things like, I find generally student efforts at this one, try to keep your language nice and tight and nice and formal. So you're not saying things like, you know, in Lewis and Avery, the cheque bounced. You would say the cheque was dishonoured. Okay, so you're still keeping your language fairly formal. And just see if you can set aside maybe, this, now that we've discussed things, this should only take you, 20 minutes odd to structure and get on paper and shoot it off to me. If you can do so, I would heartily recommend. It is worthwhile. When it comes to submitting your written assessment, you'll feel much more comfortable if you've had some formative assessment from me along the way. As I said, if you didn't do contract A with me, I would recommend you read my AJ's IRAC top tips, and maybe go and have a little look at that equity video that I put up under the week 2 tab. I'll stop sharing now. As I said, don't sweat. I will certainly get an answer guide out for you later on. Any queries, burning questions? Is it kind of hanging together? If anyone wants to stick around, I am going, Amy B. If you want to go and have a beverage to celebrate the end of Contract B for this evening, feel free. Other than that, I'm going to stick around for about another 5 minutes. And if you just wanted to quickly go through the principles for unilateral mistake that is not as to identity, so non est factum, and also unilateral mistake in equity, I will do that for just 5 minutes or so now. Other than that, if you want to retire for the evening, I shall say adieu and until next week. And